It was 22 years ago today, Jared, that Eric Bischoff awarded the big gold belt to Triple H. Brock Lesnar took the undisputed championship to SmackDown exclusively, and Eric Bischoff brought the big gold out of the archives and he gave it to Triple H, awarding him the title, making him the World Heavyweight Champion on Monday Night Raw. That was in 2002. That, of course, started the Reign of Terror. But, Jared, this conversation is not about Triple H. It's not even about the big gold belt, as much as you know that I love the big gold belt. It's not even about that. This discussion, this point in history, started 2 world championships. Never before in WWE did we have 2 world champions. Of course, WCW came in the prior year. You had the WCW Championship. They created the Undisputed Championship at the end of 2001. Of course, Chris Jericho was the first winner of that. And then that was the world champion. They did the first ever draft that year and split the rosters, and Triple H went back and forth. Hulk Hogan went back and forth on shows, and The Rock went back and forth on shows. That's right. And when Brock Lesnar won the title, I guess Vince woke up and he decided, I don't want him to travel anymore. He's just going to be on one show. We're going to create a world champion. So lots to make about 2 world champions. Where have you fallen with your opinion on, are you okay with 2 world champs? Should there just be one? Let's discuss. What you got?
Overall, I've hated the concept of 2 world champions from the time it began until now. But I will say that with Seth Rollins with the world title and Roman Reigns carrying the Universal title, I did think that for the first time it looked like we actually had 2 champions that were around the same caliber and could actually be world champion at the same time. You know, they're both good enough. My problem is that for so long you had 2 titles, and a lot of times you would have one champion that you're like, okay, that's the man. That's the one right there.
Bingo.
And then the had the other one, and it's kind of, they're kind of like the Intercontinental Champion used to be, the workhorse title. So, right. I mean, I felt better about it recently, but I wish they would do away with it and just go back to one world title, one big one.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's all about the talent that's on the other side, that's holding that other world title, because it always brought that championship down. You know, we were never, it was never, I guess you put it great when you said one was like the world champion, one was the Intercontinental Champion. You never felt like that second world title lived up to the first. You knew who was the top dog. You just had to look every year at WrestleMania as to who was main eventing. That's how you knew who was top dog. And then everybody else, it was just Daniel Bryan and Sheamus in 18 seconds. And then I think where I'm with you, I'm in the camp of I have hated 2 world titles from the beginning. And even when you have a guy as talented as Seth Rollins, I still hated it. Because as a world champion, there should be one world champion. And
I agree.
Jared, I get that there's probably politics involved, especially when you have Raw and SmackDown on separate networks. So there could be a contingency where USA wants a champion and Fox wants a champion and now Netflix wants a champion and blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on. If that's true or if that's not true, it waters down the product, man. And you look back the day where Ric Flair just went from territory to territory and defended that title that time. Do you think the NWA ever had a glimpse of a thought of, we should create another world title because Ric Flair's not come back for our territory for another 6 months? Do you think that ever happened? No.
See, one thing I want to throw in here before we get too far down the road was whenever you mentioned that about Brock and you said, well, Vince thought, well, I don't want Brock to be going back and forth, blah, blah, blah. See, I was always under the impression, I don't even know if I read it somewhere. Maybe I just read everything combined at the time it was happening until now. And it gave me the impression that Brock was getting his butt wiped by Vince McMahon, not in any kind of bad situation before anybody goes down that road. But he was getting pampered a little bit. And I think Brock did not want to travel to both shows. He did not want that kind of travel schedule. And so Vince pampered him, just like he always has a record of doing, made another world title. So there we have 2 world champions. Or at least that's why he stuck with it. I'm not sure the timeline there. But
Sure.
I was always under the impression Brock didn't want to travel, and so that was kind of the politics that may have been involved.
Yeah, I specifically remember Bruce Pritchard talking about the end of Brock's run, especially that he didn't want to travel around that time. So I can only imagine that in 2002 when he won the championship, he was already, he had Paul Heyman in his ear from the jump. I'm not saying anything good or bad about Paul Heyman. I'm just saying he can have a lot of influence on somebody, on their feelings about one matter or what have you. So I think you could be spot on there. I think it... we've said over and over that it waters down the product. What waters down the product even more is the fact that if they would have started in 2002 with 2 world champions, and in 2024, we have 2 world champions, and if they would have gone those whole 22 years and had 2 world champions, we could buy it. But Jared, how many times did they unify the titles? How many times did they just say, 1 world champion? Daniel Bryan had both world titles, and John Cena had both world titles, and I think The Rock had both world titles at one point, and of course Roman Reigns had both world titles. So it's like one side or the other. Vince wakes up and does whatever he wants, and then he decides he wants to combine the world titles. Then you get yourself in a situation where Cody Rhodes was in WrestleMania 39, where maybe they weren't ready for Roman to lose the belt, but there wasn't another world title. It just creates 2 world titles, just creates too many problems.
Yeah, it snowballs and makes one big cluster, you know what.
Yep.
I mean, I just don't like it.
Yeah, I don't either. But that being said, it happened, and if creating another world title was the way to get the big gold belt back into the fold so that we got to see that for several years, I mean, I can be okay with that. We saw Shawn Michaels hold that title. The Undertaker held that title. Randy Orton held that title. Edge held that title. So many guys held that big gold belt. So that was cool to get that back into the fold.